Welcome to Viewpoint, the public affairs show with an attitude. I'm your host, Joe Valeno. Today we have a very special guest who's been on before and is well known throughout the state of Rhode Island, Roberto Gonzalez, who is an attorney at law, and he specializes in assisting immigrants and folks who come to this country newly establish themselves with whatever kinds of legal entanglements and regulations and paperwork they get into. As you can imagine, these last few years, because of the presence of undocumented immigrants in America, there's a lot of legal work that has to be involved here. Roberto, welcome to the show. And I wanted you to come on because I understand from reading the papers and talking to folks, there's about 3 or 4 bills now pending in the General Assembly that would affect the ability of immigrants, particularly undocumented immigrants, to remain in this country and to prosper and probably take advantage of opportunities for employment and education. And one of them is, 2 of them really, have been introduced by this representative from Cranston, Robert who wants to, I guess, turn back provisions and decisions that Governor Chafee made to ease up on some of the, I would call it harassments that were visited upon people who were living in Rhode Island but were not here legally with adequate documentation. And one of his bills would restore the so-called E-Verify system for state employment, and the other one would, the other bill would roll back Governor Chafee's decision not to have local police trained to stop and arrest and send people over to federal immigration authorities, which in effect, under the rule of Governor Carcieri, the local police will be deputized as federal agents. So let's take those 2 issues first. What's the situation on E-Verify for employment?
Well, right now in the state of Rhode Island, since Governor Chafee came into office and rescinded Governor Carcieri's executive order, there is no requirement that any employer, including the state, E-Verify.
State or private employment?
That's correct. So right now what all employers are still required to do is the I-9 verification form.
That's federal. Is that federal?
That's a federal requirement. So every employer is supposed to complete that process.
And what does that do?
Well, what that does is it certifies that the employer has checked the identification of each employee.
Social security numbers and things of that nature.
Exactly. So passport, green card.
That the employer has done an adequate check to ensure that this person's not here illegally.
That's correct. And the program that the federal government is doing right now is auditing employers to make sure that they are complying. So there really is no need, in my opinion, for an E-Verify mandatory E-Verify system.
How would that work? What do they verify? What database do they use? Would they have used if it was in effect?
The E-Verify system takes the employee's social security number and runs it against the social security database.
Right.
And the social security system administration would then email back a confirmation as to whether or not the employee is eligible to work.
This person has a valid social security number.
Correct.
And even if, by the way, and I understand there are a lot of, from discussion in the news and the public the last couple of years, there's a lot of errors that are made, a lot of factual errors. But even if the person has even if a person had an invalid social security number that wasn't theirs, it would come back okay, wouldn't it?
Right. So if an employee buys a social security number on the black market and it's a good number, oh, absolutely, you can buy.
Use the name and the number. You got to get the name and the number.
Right. I mean, it's not something that people should do, obviously, but people do it. There's a huge market for this, and E-Verify is only going to create a bigger market because now with every employer checking social security numbers, these will fetch a premium on the black market. But E-Verify does nothing to catch people who are working with somebody else's social security number.
They would have to use the other person's name as well.
Correct.
The numbers match to a name.
That's correct.
So what is it? Do you have any idea what it costs these days on the black market? So underground?
I
pay
have heard
$500.
Oh no, I have heard of people paying even thousands of dollars for numbers, especially if the Social Security card comes with a birth certificate.
Wow.
So
this bill would implement that e-verification system for Rhode Island. What's the status of the bill? Do you think it'll pass? I mean, you were up there testifying against it, I assume.
In my opinion, I don't think it's going to pass. I think our legislature has avoided controversial bills. In the past, this has been a very controversial bill, and it appears to be so this year. And there's more important business for the legislature
certainly going to make
take
it
up.
a lot easier and a lot more profitable for people who can hustle invalid Social Security numbers and names, huh? They'll make more money.
Well, yeah, and it's not going to solve the problem that it seeks to solve, you know,
which is to catch, identify illegal.
Right, and it's going to drive the undocumented worker further underground. So now if you're
in the shadows, as they say.
Exactly. If you're an employer and you're going to have to e-verify, now you're probably going to pay this employee in cash. And if you have 5 or 6 of them, you're going to pay them all in cash. And that means that the state isn't going to be collecting any tax revenues for these employees. And these employees essentially won't have the same protections. You know, somebody gets hurt on the job, they're not going to report
workers' compensation. Yeah.
Exactly. So
you think it's counterproductive too, as well as
I think it is. I think it is.
To a degree, it's counterproductive.
Yes.
It forces people to do so-called underground, under-the-table work, paid under the table. Yeah.
That's in fact what has happened.
There's a big article in Sunday's paper. I guess you saw it, Sunday's Journal, about the raids have slowed down under the new administration, and various kinds of enforcement have picked up nationally on the national scene with ICE. But a lot of people, more people are being deported, I'm told, under the Obama administration, but I think that has more to do with people who are apprehended like in the southern borders than they have here in the Northeast, where we have people working. That is the big problem.
Yeah, it's hard to decipher those figures because they throw in a lot of these people who are caught trying to come into the country. Also, you don't know how many of those people are people who were already in the process and were being detained, or maybe in the federal system for illegal reentry, which is a crime. Right. So it's kind of hard, but it's no question.
Reentry is considered a crime.
Yes, that's correct.
Just a civil violation.
Right. If you come in for the first time and you sneak across the border, you have not committed a criminal act. However, if you get deported and you come back, that is a crime.
And the irony of that is, I'm just judging now from reading the papers, the guys who do that and who come back are usually career criminals. They're usually habitual criminals. They come back so they can do their crime stuff. It isn't the average immigrant who comes in looking for a better job and a better life and a job at low wages. It seems to be drug dealers and other types who no, they got to get back into the United States because they can hustle the system, you know, for big profits illegally. So I don't know how effective that is. What about the other part of Palumbo's work is to roll back Governor Chafee's decision to not train. He allowed state police to train local police. Right.
Under program 287G, the federal government would train participating police officers in immigration enforcement and deputize them essentially. And when Chafee did away with that, the state police no longer had that authority.
Did they employ that? Did they do actual training? Did they enforce it a lot? Did they stop, arrest a lot of people, and refer a lot of people to immigration, customs and enforcement, ICE?
Yeah, I don't know what the exact figures are, but I've seen a number of cases come through my office where people were actually pulled over by the state police and arrested and turned over to ICE.
Was that celebrated case where there was some 13 or 14 guys in a van?
Right, that's one of them.
From Connecticut.
Yes.
Was that one of them? Was that under the Carcieri order that they did that? State police stop?
I want to say that was right before the Carcieri order.
But what happened in that, they didn't turn everybody over. They turned a few people over to
no, they
federal.
turned
Everybody?
Yeah, everybody. And that was the driver was licensed, he was legal, but the passengers were on their way to work, and the state police, even though the stop was for supposedly a lane change violation, they insisted on asking all of the passengers for their identification. Yeah. And of course they didn't have identification. So there was a question as to whether or not the state police has the authority to ask for identification when there's no reasonable suspicion of a crime being committed.
I was at a community meeting recently on the south side where I live. Commissioner Parry was there, the Commissioner of Public Safety for Providence now. And he's a former, as you know, former colonel of the state police, former superintendent. And the policy, his policy and the policy of the department is not to ask for identification of passengers unless there's probable cause, you know. So if you stop someone because they got a dangling license plate or a defective tail light, you don't ask for ID for all the passengers. You just ask for ID for them.
Yeah, well, you can imagine, Joe, what a dilemma it makes for local enforcement authorities when they have to earn the trust of the communities that they are policing. And if people are fearing that they may be deported as a result of reporting a crime or coming forth as a witness, they are not